Hello everyone, I'm Hugo Manguinhas from Europeana Foundation. I'm here today sharing with you some of the challenges that we had on modeling on annotations on the Europeana Sounds project. This project is a result of the work from several partners institutions. One of them is Europeana Foundation, the AIT, also Austrian Institute of Technology, the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision, Shift, which is behind the European, which I'll show also. Also Pandit, which was talked about early in today, and NQA. So I'll start by explaining what is Europeana. So Europeana is Europe's platform for digital cultural heritage. We aggregate metadata from all EU countries. It's around 3,500 galleries, museums, archives, and libraries. And more than 52 million objects that we aggregate so far, and in around 50 languages. Why are annotations useful in our context? For the users, it's a means to contribute with their knowledge, but also share and discuss with other users. For a cultural institution, it's the way a new opportunity to improve the quality of their metadata, so improving the consistency of the data, but also improving the semantic description of the metadata by either linking to external resources that will make data less ambiguous, but also improve the cross-linking between resources within the catalog. We'll speak about now a bit of about the Europeana Sounds project. So it's a project that aims to increase the number of audio content in Europeana, both in geographic and in thematic coverage. But apart from the aggregation, it also aims at enriching the metadata through innovative approaches to improve the discovery and use of audio content in Europeana. I'll speak about now a bit of the annotation scenarios that we considered in the project. So starting by the use case, so a user annotates a cultural heritage object, in particular the information describing the object, the metadata. Also the contextual information, so meaning the metadata about agents, places, subjects. And also the media resources attached to the metadata. So in the description of the item, you can have also images, sounds, or video that will actually have the depiction of the item itself by the following actions. So we considered one of them to tag with terms from controlled vocabularies, which I will speak about it. Also complete and correct information, favor or moderate annotations obeyed by other users, and finally the two others, which is to comment and discuss with other users and relate objects together, which I will not speak about today. Starting by explaining a bit what is the infrastructure in Europeana Sounds. We are working with 4 partners which are developing client applications for annotation. One of them is the D-Session and TunePal. So in this session you can upload a sound or also a sheet of music, and then use TunePal to match with the related resource in Europeana. And then post in this session. European, which I will speak about it next. Pandit, which was also explained early in the morning, but also speak about it in my presentation, and which allows you to create a collection of items. So all these annotation providers will use a single annotation server, which will then be used to display the annotations in the Europeana Collections portal. Besides displaying the annotations gathered from all these different platforms, the Europeana Collections portal will also be able to create annotations and have also moderation functionality to moderate the annotations. On the right side, you can see also the resources that we use to improve the semantic description of the metadata, which I will also speak as one of the use cases in this presentation. So, starting by how we chose to exchange the annotations across the platform. So we adopted the web annotation model. For us, it's a simple model to exchange the annotation, but also flexible enough to cope with complex scenarios. And we also adopted, we are creating also a REST API for annotations, which will be based on the web annotation platform. Most of this were explained by Rob in the morning. And this REST API will be used by developers to retrieve annotations, but also create and search for annotations in Europeana. Starting by the first use cases that I wanted to present in this today. So here is an item in Europeana. So it's a bus and trombone delivered by the University of Edinburgh. You can see here, so given the use cases that the user wishes to tag this Europeana object with a resource from a control vocabulary, it can mean, for example, a resource from MIMO, the Music Instruments Ontology, or could be a resource like TBpedia, Wikidata, or other lot resource. So here explaining a bit the case of Pandit. So you see the item in below. Also in the middle you can see that in Pandit you can select the item is selected. You can select that you want to tag it, and then you want to choose the term that you want to tag it with. From these, you can see also in this list the set of controlled vocabularies that are available, at least in this setting, to tag it with. And while you type in, it comes. In this case, I selected DBpedia as our target vocabulary. It will get the resource from DBpedia, and then after it will create the annotation here using the web annotation model. In this case, I'll not go very deep. I'll go more deeper in other use cases, but it's very simple. So you have the semantic tag, you have the concept there as a body, you have the target as the CHO, which is the object itself, and also the motivation as tagging. So when implementing this use cases, we had still some questions that may significantly influence the user experience. One of them is if different semantic resources should be displayed in the same way or not. For example, if you have a place or if you have an agent, if you would like to in the display to distinguish between the two, because you'll have also names of persons that could be places and could be also subjects, and this you want to distinguish. But also when you consider, for example, just subjects, you can consider, for example, rock as a sound genre, but also consider it as a physical thing. So would you like also to display besides the differentiation between what is the subject, but also the scheme that is that for which the term belongs. One other question is which labels should be displayed. I would say that the label from the setting of the user that matches the user preferences would be picked, but what happens if no label is available? Will you display it in English, or will you display in another language? Another thing is would you like to annotate with any kind of term, any resource from any vocabulary? So for example, I imagine that for Mimo, it will be all right to annotate with any kind of resource, but for DBpedia, that will not be the same. And why DBpedia? Because not all the concepts will be also described in these very domain-specific vocabularies. And you, in some situations, will want to rely on DBpedia to have the match for the concept. And what do we do? And another question is what we do if the vocabulary itself is changed. So will you update the annotation? Will you consider the resource as part of the annotation, separate? So this is the kinds of questions that we had. So this brings some challenges. So for client applications, they must have all the data necessary for display. They need, in a way, they need to process also this data in an uniform way. So this means that resources must be dereferenced. They need to be translated into a uniform format. And for this, we chose the EDM model because it is the model that we're currently using at Europeana to represent the metadata. And also, it reuses existing standards like SCOS, Dublin Core, or WGS84 for positioning. And it gives support to all contextual resources that we have considered. So here is also a use case that we wanted to bring, which is related to semantic tagging. So in this case, you have Historypin. Historypin is a platform where users can share images about their local history. So here is an item from the British Library for a song. You can specify, for example, so Historypin, you can pin it in the map, the location for these items, and you can allow also the users to suggest a different location for this item. So here you can specify the coordinates and also the radius in case it doesn't know the concrete location of that image. Here is how it would be represented. For us, we considered the resource to be like a virtual resource, not a named resource, and would use as EDM properties for representing the coordinates. So in this case, it will be a specialization of normal semantic tagging of the resource, but with the resource which will be created at that moment. So here is another use case that I wanted to bring is the annotation of metadata, the pundit use case. We considered first explaining a bit what we mean with metadata annotation. So we consider metadata as any annotation that refers or asserts a statement to the information described in the object in order to complete or correct it. Ideally, and like supposedly other annotations, they should be also agnostic to the way they are presented to the interface and also machine readable. Why? So that annotations can survive changes in the interface design, but also can be shared outside the interface. And finally, also that other software applications can take further advantage of it. For example, if you want to train a machine learning system, you could use the annotations to do automatic, so that you could build a software application that will make automatic annotations, for example. So here in particular, he'll explain a bit what we propose. So here you can see also an item in Pundit. This is a different version, by the way, from the one that we displayed before. So we have here the annotation. So in terms of the target, in this case, we will point directly to the statement. In this case, we created our own selector to select the metadata, and this actually was proposed by Pundit. And then what we wish to assert will be asserted as a graph, as a statement. This is actually a case that comes more from the open annotation, which kind of supports this, but currently web annotation does not. And then also the motivation brings the question that which motivation we would choose. Also, it depends a lot on the what you mean by the target here, because in our case, identifier is identifier of the conceptual resource and not the actual metadata, which for us it's separate. So because we are aggregators, so you collect different views over the metadata. So here the identifier is the general real item of the real concept of the item. So finally, once we start to display all these annotations in the Europeana Collections portal, we'll start to need to address to moderate the annotations. So for us, doing the moderation per annotation will simply not scale. We'll most likely, or we envision that we'll have a significant number of annotations. So we need to find ways, a more crowdsourcing moderation way to let users control moderate the annotations of other users. For this, we are envisioning of applying a policy of the three strikes out. So if 3 users report as abusive a particular annotation, then the annotation will automatically not be displayed. Of course, this needs still to be tested in practice. This still can be used in malicious way. So we still need to test this. Another thing is how we can differentiate what will be a report of an abuse and also defining what is more relevant or not. So what we envision is that if you have a significant number of annotations and if you have users asserting relevance to the annotations, you could, for example, show only the most relevant ones in the display. So this is also something that we are trying to tackle in our work. Finally, as a conclusion, so as requirements are actually becoming more clear as we work on really concrete use cases. We started with with our own understanding of the cases, and while we are really working with the concrete ones, we start to understand what are the challenges of all this, and also there's still the need of testing this with the real users, and for this we are having several campaigns with domain experts and normal users to test all of this. For expressing the cross-platform annotations, there is, in an uniform way, is a big challenge. The web annotation model really gives a good interoperable base, but we need but not all the scenarios are covered yet. And also there's the need for best practices on using the model. It will likely that the model will grow to cover these use cases, but also you'll still need some scenarios to be stated on how it should be best used. And finally, there is still a lot of work ahead in the project, but we are actually making progress, which is not easy.
Questions? Yes.
So one of the open questions that you had up on the slide was around differentiating between rock, the music genre, and rock, the actual physical object. I was wondering why that's an open question. Are you not sure, based on user experience, what would be the best thing to do, or is it technically you don't know how you would differentiate between the two?
First, well, our own impressions is that we still need to test it with the users, especially when they start to really, so for example, in the patent use cases, and you can get from DBpedia several resources. There's still the need to test it with users if they will actually will understand what information they will expect to see to actually choose the right resource. Our impression is that using the different typings differentiating the different kinds of resources would be helpful, and probably for some of the types of entities, we'll probably go a bit deeper and have it more especially for subjects, you probably will have the chain of the terminology, so that you can distinguish between a subject in one scheme from a subject in another scheme. But it is still something that and also the thing is that web annotation doesn't actually say how we will represent the semantic resource. It only gives you, like, you will have the where I, and then you do what you can with it. So there is still a lot of work for us, and I don't know ever if the web annotation model will cover this or not. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, thanks.
How do you deal with user-defined tags and that becoming part of an accepted ontology? Do you accommodate for user-defined tags?
Could you repeat, please?
Do you accommodate user-defined tags and to identify, for example, the rock?
Yes.
Okay.
How the user defines?
Yeah, and how does it become part of the accepted vocabulary?
So the idea in Padlet, for example, is that you can select the different vocabularies that you will pick the resource from. And then in the display, you will need to find a way to distinguish between the two different resources. So more concretely, for specific entities, we'll have different parts of the information being represented. That's what we hope to do. For example, for places, it will show, for example, the country, then the label of the country, the label of the part of the location. Coordinates, it will not be interesting, but for example, for agents, we'll have the dates, date of birth and date of death when they exist. So this is the part of information that will also be displayed depending on each kind of entity, in the hope that the user looking at that information will easily distinguish between the two resources and understand which one he really wishes to tag with.
I don't know where Peter is. I have seen him this morning, but should change my glasses. So while he's doing that, any other question? Yeah.
Is this yours?
So I think that the previous question was a little bit more Hugo. I think that the previous question was a little bit more about the user, that it's using a simple tagging, putting rock on an item, and later on he or someone else discovers that there is actually a vocabulary, a semantic resource of the rock genre, which is already used in the system for other items. I assume that this is what you wanted to refer more. And if there is a mechanism to identify later and to change the simple tag into a semantic tag.
Actually, this is one of the cases that we are considering. We don't know yet how we would support it and how we would model it. If it would be another annotation over that annotation, if you would expand that annotation using, because you can use name entity recognition to actually then improve the tagging, which in this case will be a simple tagging and convert it into a semantic tagging. But this also brings the question of, will you preserve the label as originally, the user originally written? If you if you expand in this case, or if you have the annotations over the annotation, which I think it's probably the best option.
Thank you very much.